Is this setting up to do some form of student loan forgiveness? Maybe. To juice the economy, Biden bets on the poor. Mr. Biden's bottom-up $1.9 trillion aid package is a sharp reversal from the tax cut bill that was President Donald J. Trump's first big legislative victory. I think it would have been way more based if Ben Shapiro got some fucking crazy music in the background, dressed up in some crazy black cloak, and just screamed into the camera, welfare queen, welfare queen, welfare queen. Like, why not just do that for 8.5? Why, do this?
There's nothing else to say except your failures. Now, I told you, there's stuff in that bill that's good. It was a must-pass bill.
So the problem is that right now she's saying something she thinks not good, but she just doesn't know any of the data or have any idea what happened during the lockdown, right? So the reason why, but now we've read this, right? Because we spent a full 30 minutes reading articles, okay?
I did not expect a whole lot from Biden. Like nothing, really. If you were around then, you know numerous times. I said, he's not my man. He is not my people. We don't share the same politics. We don't share the same ideology. He's not my guy. He's just better than the other guy. He's a stopgap. Honestly, I expected a reboot of the Obama administration. And I think there's a lot of people who think that's what we're getting. It's not. It's not. Not if you're paying attention. It's not what's happening. I also think there's a habit among people who talk about politics to talk about what should be rather than what is first. You can talk about what should be, but you have to acknowledge the reality of the world that you're in.
Because absolutely zero people were like, honestly, we really need to limit the scope of this. Like, who was making an argument? Republicans certainly weren't. Republicans are too busy talking about Mr. Potato Head's cock, okay? That's literally all Republicans have been.
So Hassan doesn't know any of the information. So again, as we said before a million times, middle class. What is in the stimulus bill? The measure passed by the Senate headed to the House for final approval before going to President Biden's desk contains money for direct checks, jobless benefits, state and local aid, and more. President Biden's $1.9 trillion economic stimulus plan would have far-reaching effects on society as the country tries to turn the corner on a pandemic that has killed more than 500,000 people. The mammoth bill approved by the Senate on Saturday would provide direct payments to Americans, extend jobless benefits, and provide a huge financial infusion to states and local governments, as well as to schools to help them reopen. Provides funding for priorities like coronavirus testing and vaccine distribution, and it amounts to an ambitious anti-poverty program offering significant benefits for low-income people. The bill would give out $1,400 stimulus checks. Individuals making under $75,000 and married couples making under $150,000 would receive direct payments of $1,400 per person. The bill would also provide $1,400 per dependent. Damn. Payments would gradually decrease above those income levels and disappear entirely above an income cap of $80,000 for individuals and $160,000 for married couples. Wait, what? I think that scaling benefits is very good, but I don't know why you would go from 75,000 to 80,000. I feel like it should probably be like 75 to 125 or maybe 75 to 100, but like 75,000 to 80,000 seems a little bit weird. That window is like incredibly small. Republicans forced that, sure. Those caps were lowered from the thresholds in the House's version of the stimulus plan, which set the cutoffs at $100,000 for individuals and $200,000 for married couples. Yeah, that seems like more reasonable. The current $300 per week boost to unemployment benefits would continue. The Senate bill extends unemployment programs through early September, including the $300 per week federal supplement provided in the last stimulus plan passed in December. Mr. Biden had proposed bumping up that supplemental benefit to $400 per week, which the House had agreed to, but the Senate kept it at $300 per week. Yeah, we go over this like every time. The Senate bill also includes a provision intended to avert surprise tax bills for people who lost jobs, waiving federal income taxes for the first $10,200 of unemployment benefits received in 2020 for households earning under $150K. Nice. The child tax credit would become more generous, among other benefits. For 2021, the bill would temporarily expand the child tax credit, which is currently worth up to $2,000 per child under 17. Did that get raised recently? I feel like it wasn't like that like 6 or 7 years ago, because me and Rachel would go back and forth on how to file like for Nathan or whatever. Under the legislation, the tax credit would be as much as $3,600 for children up to age 5 and as much for $3,000 for children 6 to 17. I wonder, is this expansion temporary, or the bill would make the full value of the credit available to low-income people who are currently ineligible or receive only a portion, and for the second half of this year, would have the federal government send advanced payments of the credit to Americans in periodic installments akin to a guaranteed income for families with children. Not bad. The legislation would also expand the Child Independent Care Tax Credit for 2021, and it would expand the Earned Income Tax Credit for workers without children for this year as well. Through 2025, it would exempt student loan forgivenesses from income taxes. It would exempt student loan forgiveness from income taxes. Interesting. Money would go to fight the pandemic and help states, local governments, and schools. Is this setting up to do some form of student loan forgiveness? Maybe. Money would go to fight the pandemic and to help states, local governments, and schools. The bill would provide funding for vaccine distribution, as well as coronavirus testing, contact tracing, and genomic sequencing. It would give money to the Federal Emergency Management Agency as well. Stimulus payments will not be taxed because they're an advance on a tax credit known as the Recovery Rebate Credit. It would provide $350 billion for states, local governments, territories, and tribal governments, and it contains about $130 billion for schools. It also includes funding for colleges and universities, transit agencies, housing aid, childcare providers, and food assistance. In addition, the bill contains funding to help businesses, including restaurants and live venues, and it includes a bailout for multi-employer pension plans that are financially troubled. The Affordable Care Act would also get a boost. The bill would temporarily increase subsidies for people purchasing health insurance through the Affordable Care Act's marketplaces. It includes billions of dollars for public health programs and veterans' health care. It also seeks to help those who have lost jobs keep the health insurance coverage they had through their employer, covering the full cost of premiums through a federal program called COBRA through September. COBRA insurance is usually pretty expensive, isn't it? I feel like that's my understanding of it, but I could be wrong. Every time you lose a job, you get those COBRA pamphlets, but I feel like they're woof. Although I might just be thinking that too, because it's one thing to have health insurance deducted from your paycheck, and then it's another thing to be like, hey, pay $100 every 2 weeks, out of nowhere. You're like, okay. So it's probably, COBRA's probably cheaper than normal independent insurance. It just feels really expensive because you've just lost your job and it's not being deducted anymore. One thing missing, a minimum wage hike. As part of the stimulus plan, Mr. Biden wanted to raise the federal minimum wage, which is now $7.25 an hour, to $15 an hour. The stimulus bill passed by the House would increase the wage to $15 an hour by 2025, but the Senate parliamentarian said the provision violated the strict rules that Senate Democrats had to follow, passed the bill through a special process that shielded it from a filibuster, and allowed for its approval with only Democratic support. Vote in the Senate on Friday to add the wage increase back to the bill failed. The Senate bill also dropped funding for a rail project in Silicon Valley, Northern California, and a bridge between upstate New York and Canada, two provisions that were included in the House bill and drew criticism from Republicans. The ACA thing is actually crazy. Oh, this is the income subsidy. ACA subsidy. Oh, how much of your percentage of income can the premiums be? Gotcha. So the ACA, the COVID-19 relief law basically hard capped at 8.5%. The amount of your income that you're generally thought to be required to pay for health insurance, basically. Stimulus bill transforms options for state and local governments. Okay, these were more specific articles, I think, related to some of the provisions of the stimulus. Stimulus bill transforms options for state and local governments. Once fearing fiscal disaster, governments are suddenly awash in their share of $350 billion available for projects and needs that previously seemed out of reach. $350 billion. Damn. What is the, let's see, city budget LA? I'm going to guess $20 billion for what the budget of LA is. What do you guys think? That's my guess. City budget LA. Ooh, $10 billion. Okay. The entire 2020 to 2021 budget for the city of LA is $10 billion. Richard F. Cortez, the top elected official in Hidalgo County at the southern tip of Texas, is so full of anticipation for the federal stimulus money that is about to flow into his county that he has memorized the precise amount and happily recites it. $212,702,647. Over the past year, Hidalgo, a border community that is one of the country's poorest counties, has lurched from one disaster to another. The coronavirus pandemic hit, unemployment skyrocketed, a hurricane swept through, and then came the winter freeze. So the money, Mr. Cortez said, could not have come at a better time. The American Rescue Plan, it's a proper term for the situation that we're in, said Mr. Cortez, a retired CPA, is pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing that we're still standing up. The biggest infusion of funds in decades will start soon, putting state, local, and tribal governments in a situation they have not experienced in years. Items that had long seemed totally unaffordable are now well within reach. Mr. Cortez says it is too early to know precisely how Hidalgo County will allocate its money, but states can use the money for pandemic-related costs, offsetting lost revenues to provide essential government services, and for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure projects. The $350 billion it was earmarked for state, local, and tribal governments in U.S. territories was one of the largest spending items in the entire bill, said Dan White, a director of fiscal policy research at Moody's Analytics, a financial analysis firm. He said the total was more than quadruple what is needed to plug state and local budget holes through next summer. Democrats in Congress and local governments who supported the bill said that helping America's states, cities, and counties recover from a historic pandemic was more than simply covering shortfalls, and that they worry that Congress would do too little instead of too much. They note that most of the aid will be available through the end of 2024. This bill is a historic investment in local government, said Mark Riddico, Director of Government Affairs for the National Association of Counties. Republicans and conservatives in Washington called it wasteful overkill. Increasingly, federal proposals to provide a cash infusion for state and local governments has become a solution in search of a problem, said the Tax Foundation, a right-leaning nonprofit in Washington, D.C. It is a very difficult picture from 1 year ago when state and local governments predicted collapses in revenue and slashed their spending accordingly, laying off park workers, teachers, and sheriff's deputies. But in an unexpected twist, revenue in most states did not drop nearly as much as predicted. And now governments are going into their budget-making season with a markedly brighter set of numbers. We somehow, between all of the stimulus under Trump and between the unemployment benefits, I think most of America financially weathered 2020 way better than most people seem to think. This is something we've talked about on stream before, that the aggregate income of Americans increased quite a bit, and the aggregate outlays, the expenditures of Americans decreased by a lot as well. 2020 was not the financial doomsday year that we all thought it was going to be, and in some ways, a lot of Americans actually made out surprisingly well, especially people that were able to take advantage of like working from home and whatnot, on top of like all the extra like social spending and everything too, and then all the money that was saved that wasn't being spent for people going out to eat or out to bars or spent on other like games or whatever, like, and the unemployment benefits were also really big. And then also from Moody's on how much we spend as a proportion of GDP compared to other countries, the United States, I saw, because people were pointing to this chart, Noah might have posted this, I don't remember, on Twitter, the United States we spent a lot of money for our relief, for the CARES Act and everything we did. We spent a lot of money and expanding the unemployment benefits and everything. This is including Biden's fiscal rescue. Even before the Biden stuff, I think, the United States was dramatically outspending in GDP per capita, or percentage of GDP, I guess, for our population. It was insane. Even under Trump, we were still spending like quite a bit. It sounds to me like the USA is based as fuck sometimes. Something that is really frustrating, I tweeted this out, is it feels like the United States has the opportunity to do more, like to just do an unimaginable amount of shit. If we just had like the political will and the social unity behind it, like when you look at the vaccine shit, like why couldn't the United States do that for everything? I don't know, like that's like really, really annoying to me, the political division in the country. Like, I think we could have had like one of the most aggressively, unbelievably fucking insane responses to the coronavirus if we took it seriously. And I noticed it because there were some things that were happening that were pretty cute, but they happened like 10 months in. Like, I don't know if anybody had an iPhone, but I remember I got a message or a notification on my iPhone at one point that said something like, hey, like you have the opportunity to be, or you might have been automatically registered in like a contact tracing thing, where if somebody else that has an iPhone gets sick and you make contact with them, that like it would automatically alert you. Like if shit like this was running from like day one, holy shit, dude. Like I feel like we could have done so much better in relating to this stuff than, like, we could have been more comparable to South Korea rather than the UK. December 22nd, 2020. The U.S. government gave out way more than the $600. Complain all you want where the money is going, but stop saying it's less than it is. Oh, sure. Yeah, okay, this might have been an article that I read before. And there are some, like, man, dude, there are some graphs for the amount of, like, relief that the U.S. spent. I remember saying this on stream. I think I said this the last time I had, like, a big rant to you guys about how, like, I get worried that, like, I learn a lot by conventional wisdom, and even it seems to apply well to common sense. And it's, like, the talking point of, like, everybody. But the amount of spending, people are making it sound like the U.S. spent nothing on economic aid. And I was under that same impression, that like everybody's dying and we're not handing out any money. I think you've even heard me on stream say over and over and over again that like, I can't believe, I've made the same joke that like, I can't believe we only gave out $600 stimulus checks. That's insane. But compared to like average, like of like other OECD countries, the United States gave out more than the average, which I think he said down here. As an actual percent of GDP spent on COVID relief through the end of 2020, the U.S. has actually been a little above average, lagging behind Japan. And this is as a percentage of GDP, where we're already the highest GDP country in the world too, right? So as a GDP per capita, I think that would mean that the percentage would be even higher. And this is before Biden's bill. This is before anything from Biden. This is just under Trump. But like the CARES Act and the PPP and everything was... According to Mr. White, 31 states now have enough cash to fully absorb the economic stress of the pandemic recession on their own. The surprises keep on coming, he said. The cash is coming over the objection of Republicans in Congress, none of whom voted for the bill. And guess what? That doesn't matter because we have 50 Democrats in Congress. But some Republicans in local governments said the choice between people and politics was not particularly difficult. Mayor Jerry Dyer of Fresno, the largest city in California's San Joaquin Valley, an agriculture-rich region that is a conservative stronghold, was one of the few Republican leaders in the area who supported the bill. Mr. Dyer said that his city had been weighing potential layoffs of more than 200 city employees, including police officers and firefighters, and it faced a $25 million budget deficit. But the bill put an end to any layoff discussions. Fresno, a city of 531,000, was poised to receive $177 million. When you make those types of decisions and you go against a party that I'm a part of, it does feel lonely, said Mr. Dyer, a former Fresno police chief. You start wondering along the way what kind of impact that could have on you in the future. But the reality is, I felt I was making the right decision for the right reason to benefit the people of Fresno, not necessarily a party. The aid will be distributed to states according to a formula that is based largely on the state's unemployment rate, officials said. There are a host of rules on how the money can be spent. For example, the money can't be used to pay down pension obligations or for cutting taxes. Republicans in Congress argued that a funding formula based on unemployment, this is I wonder what the rationale is for this, but this sounds like really smart. You wouldn't want to use the money to pay down pension obligations or for cutting taxes, because then you're just giving people a bunch of money and setting them up in the future for failure. Like, oh shit, we got all this money. Pay down what we owe on the pensions, cut fucking taxes, and then like 5 years from now, it's like, oh my God, we can't pay for anything. Our pensions are fucked. Our taxes, our revenue is way too low. Like, that seems like a good, that's a smart idea, I think. That's a good idea. Or it seems to me to be a good idea. I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't be. New from Jordan Peterson, Beyond Order. 12 more life-saving principles. How many more does he got? Why doesn't he just give it to us all? It wasn't Manchin's idea, dumb fucks. Uh-oh. MJ Kurt firing back in chat saying it was not Manchin's idea. It wasn't Manchin's idea. Don't believe chat. They're dumb. Republicans in Congress argued that a funding formula based on unemployment instead of population benefits Democratic-led states and hurts Republican-controlled ones. One analysis from Representative Jason Smith, Republican of Missouri, found that 33 states were getting less money based on the unemployment formula, all but 10 of them led by Republican governors. But many Democratic officials and some Republican ones disputed the notion of a partisan bailout. I think my residents know I don't give a hoot about party. All I care about is making sure the street sweeper runs, the police show up, and the water doesn't stop, said Aquianeta Warren, a Republican who is the mayor of Fontana, a working-class suburb east of Los Angeles, set to receive $52 million. Local governments have been hit harder than states. 3/4 of the more than 1.3 million jobs lost among state and local governments since February 2020 have been at the local level. Mr. White of Moody's found the vast majority of them from school districts. Counties, which are critical geographies for public services like emergency services, public health departments, and local jails, were ecstatic. Many had complained that funds from previous rounds of pandemic stimulus had not reached them because the funds were routed through states for smaller counties. This time, the checks are coming directly from the U.S. Treasury Department. The sheer size of the sums has shifted the scale of what is possible. Erie County, New York, which includes Buffalo, has for years struggled with barely functioning internet in its rural areas, which have been mostly bypassed by internet providers. People would drive to the library, sit in the car in the parking lot to get on the Wi-Fi, said Mark Polenkars, the county executive. You know what that means, boys? All of your rural friends better be subbing to Destiny now. If there's going to be broadband rolling out, tell your friends to watch me. I was somewhat of a rural man myself, okay? A plan for the county to lay cable for internet service was scrapped a year ago when COVID-19 blew a hole in the county's budget, but Mr. Polenkars plans to to include the broadband project in the $178 million the county will receive. We're going to get that done now, he said. Coroners' offices, usually part of county governments, reflect the ravages of the past year. Dottie Owens, the coroner for Ada County, Idaho, which includes Boise, said the stimulus money could not come soon enough as a number of coroners in rural communities in the state were still without proper personal protective equipment. The needs go well beyond this moment, she said. The overdose rate in her county is up, as is the suicide rate, and there's an urgent need for more funding for mental health services. Last year, her office had more homicides of children in the past 5 years combined. The suicide rate has been declining, and then you lock everybody down for a year, and what do you expect, she said. One of the reasons the finances of state and local governments emerged better than expected in the way jobs were lost in the recession. One of the reasons the finances of state and local governments emerged better than expected is the way jobs were lost in this recession. According to Mr. White's analysis, fewer than 1 million of the approximately 10 million jobs still missing from before the pandemic are in what are considered high-wage industries. In contrast, during the Great Recession, more than a fifth of the jobs lost were in high-wage industries, he found. Because most taxes are paid by those in the upper and middle parts of the wage ladder, revenue collection took less of a hit than was expected. This has been good for the revenues of states like California, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey that rely on high-income residents for a substantial share of income tax revenue. This is what I was saying, that was like, if you're like a white-collar worker and you got to stay home and like work from home, you made bank in this pandemic. And you saved a lot of money too. Like, it was really funny because on Reddit, like one of the popular circle jokes was like, if I'm going to stay home and work from home, I think that my employer needs to be paying for my internet connection, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, you are saving so much money because you don't have to waste money on gas, and nobody sees this, but you're saving a lot of money on wear and tear on your vehicle as well. So like, if you worked for a year at home, you just saved what, 10, 15,000 miles on your vehicle, depending on your commute? Like, that's a big deal. California recorded a surplus. Most stunning marker of the day, the California budget is so much money that the state would hit the GAN limit for only a second time since 1979. Symbolic, but it would mean $51 million to schools and $50 million in tax rebates. Give me my dollar back, California. Hell yes. Not to mention that if your commute sucks, you get all that time back into your life that you have to spend fucking driving. True. And you're probably saving money because you're not stopping at Starbucks on the way to work or getting fast food on the way home from work too. Yeah. My company stepped up on paying for internet and electricity for working hours and also still paid me my monthly train pass, about $110, even though I was going to the office once a week. Nice. And is public transport shit in LA? No, because there is no public transport in LA. I think there are like 3 buses that drive around here every now and then. Why are they giving back tax money when they owe a shit ton to pensions? I don't know how they're allowed to allocate that money. I'm just not sure. In California, the pot of stimulus money was so large, it put state officials on the defensive. The state government's direct stimulus intake, $26 billion. In its January budget surplus projection, it was $15 billion. State finance officials said the stimulus money was much needed because California's bump in revenues was not a sign of a complete economic recovery. The state lost a record 1.6 million jobs in the pandemic in 2020. Destiny, public transit is unneeded. Public transit is absolutely needed. It is a huge driver of inequality and just wasted life and time, and it fucks up cities, and like we desperately need more public transit in some of the larger cities in the United States. Don't equate where we are on a revenue basis with where we are on an economy basis, said H.D. Palmer, a deputy director of the Deputy's Department of Finance. It's going to take us at least 2 years, if not longer, for us to get back to pre-pandemic employment levels. The financial picture is far more grim in California cities and counties. We've been fighting this battle against COVID-19 with our credit cards and our savings accounts, said Mayor Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles. The city's budget shortfall was estimated last month at $750 million. The stimulus gives Los Angeles a $1.3 billion injection, almost double the budget gap. Some mayors were still in shock. It's unbelievable, said Savant Murick, a mayor of Ithaca, New York. He said his city would receive $17 million, an amount that is about quadruple the size of the deficit. Is the stimulus aid too much? No, he said, but the fight for funds will be fierce, with unions and neighborhood organizations and other interest groups all lobbying for a share. Honestly, if the federal government sent every community this amount of money every year, we'd be living in a cleaner, safer, more prosperous country, he said. The looming fight over the money, he said, is a small price to pay. Damn. A last-minute add to stimulus bill could restrict state tax cuts. Republicans say Congress is infringing on state sovereignty by trying to limit the ability of local governments to control their finances. Washington, a last-minute change in the $1.9 trillion economic relief package that President Biden signed into law this week includes a provision that could temporarily prevent states that receive government aid from turning around and cutting taxes. The restriction, which was added by Senate Democrats, is intended to ensure that states use federal funds to keep their local economies humming and avoid drastic budget cuts, and not simply use the money to subsidize tax cuts. Oh, this was linked. So who actually was in charge of this besides Senate Democrats? Oh, so it was Manchin. Who pushed back against him? Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat of West Virginia, explained why he pushed for the language in a briefing this week, arguing that states should not be cutting taxes at a time when they need more money to combat the virus. He urged states to postpone their plans to cut taxes. Based. All right, well, this is a based push. Okay. To juice the economy, Biden bets on the poor. Mr. Biden's bottom-up $1.9 trillion aid package is a sharp reversal from the tax cut bill that was President Donald J. Trump's first big legislative victory. To jumpstart the ailing economy, President Biden is turning to the lowest paid workers in America and to the people who are currently unable to work at all. Mr. Biden's $1.9 trillion $1.9 trillion economic relief package, which cleared the Senate on Saturday and could be headed for the president's signature in a matter of days, would overwhelmingly help low earners and the middle class, with little direct aid for the high earners who have largely kept their jobs and padded their savings over the past year. I'm so glad this was means tested. Oh God, it's so good. I don't know. I think it was good. $1.9 trillion and all of it, or the majority of it, directed at people under $75,000 for an individual, $150,000 for married earners. Like, splitting this up more, what would the checks have been? Like $700 a piece, $600 a piece, $800 a piece? What do you think? I wonder what the per person would have looked like. For the president, the plan is more than just a stimulus proposal. It is a declaration of his economic policy. Plan is more than just a stimulus proposal. It is a declaration of his economic policy, one that captures the principle Democrats and liberal economists have espoused over the past decade. The best way to stoke faster economic growth is from the bottom up. Mr. Biden's approach in his first major economic legislation is in stark contrast to President Donald J. Trump's, whose initial effort in Congress was a tax cut package in 2017 that largely benefited corporations and wealthier Americans. The American Rescue Plan advanced by Mr. Biden includes more generous direct benefits for low-income Americans than the rounds of stimulus passed last year under Mr. Trump, even though it will arrive at a time when economic and coronavirus vaccine statistics suggest the broad economy is poised to take flight. It is more focused on people than on businesses, and it is expected to help women and minorities in particular because they have taken an outsized hit the pandemic recession. Researchers predict it could be one of the most effective laws to fight poverty in a generation. Columbia University Center on Poverty and Social Policy estimates that the plan's provisions, including a generous expansion of tax credits for low-income Americans with children, would reduce the poverty rate by more than a quarter for adults and cut the child poverty rate in half. As with Mr. Trump's stimulus bills, the new legislation contains provisions intended to attack the virus itself, including money for COVID testing and vaccine distribution. But it also includes elements of long-standing Democratic priorities that will apply widely to lower-income Americans, whether they are hurting financially from the pandemic or not. In addition to the tax credits, the bill increases subsidies for childcare, broadens eligibility under the Affordable Care Act, and expands food stamps, rental assistance, and unemployment benefits, among other provisions. Mr. Biden also tried to include a $15 an hour minimum wage in the bill, but it did not survive Senate parliamentary rules. Mr. Biden's economic team is betting that a mix of $1,400 checks to individuals, more generous jobless aid, and other safety net benefits in the plan will help power a rapid increase in economic growth by aiming money at people who need help right now to pay their bills, buy groceries, and stave off eviction or foreclosure, as opposed to higher earners who would be more likely to save the money. Many economists predict that the increase in consumer spending would spur more hiring and business production, helping to lift the economy to its fastest annual growth rate since the mid-1980s. Mr. Biden's plan has angered congressional Republicans who have pushed the president to focus his efforts on supporting businesses crippled by the pandemic and lifting any remaining barriers to the full reopening of economic activity as soon as possible. It has also drew warnings from Wall Street traders and high-profile liberal economists like the former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, who fear that pouring so much fuel on the economy will stoke dangerously high inflation. Does seem like a lot of money, and I do wonder about the city budget thing. That seems like a lot of money. I know that it's possible that the examples in the last New York Times article were cherry-picked, but the idea that like these cities are having these budget holes that are being like more than double, triple, or quadruple compensated for, I kind of wonder what's going to happen with that much money being thrown onto things. If that's going to like be like a little like a flash fire or whatever, like a little bit too much. But much of what conservatives and fiscal hawks call wasteful, untargeted, or counterproductive spending of Mr. Biden's bill are, in the eyes of Mr. Biden and his allies, the key ingredients for a roaring recovery once widespread vaccine distribution restores a sense of normalcy across the nation. Focusing on marginalized workers, said Janelle Jones, the chief economist of the Labor Department, is really the way to make sure we are lifting all boats. The Fed believes the economy can run hot without inflation. Hasn't the economy been running hot for like a decade without inflation? Is this really not going to show up anywhere? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Like Mr. Trump's first major piece of legislation was scored by budget analysts as adding nearly $2 trillion to the federal debt. Like Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden has employed a parliamentary process that allows his bill to pass without a single vote from the opposing party. Both presidents cast their respective plans as crucial aid for economies mired in growth that was unacceptably slow. But unlike Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump pursued a top-down approach to reinvigorating economic and wage growth. He cut taxes for corporations and other businesses, alongside cuts in individual tax rates up and down the income spectrum. His advisors predicted that the moves would significantly accelerate business investment and generate a sustained economic boom that would in turn drive up incomes for low earners in the middle class, even though the direct benefits of the bill were disproportionately concentrated among the rich. Unlike Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden pursued a sustained investment increase did not materialize as predicted, but economists generally agree that the cuts helped to temporarily bolster economic and wage growth in the year after they passed. High earners and large companies showed little sign of needing government help today. On the whole, the pandemic recession and recovery have made them richer. Workers earning higher wages and those able to work remotely are far less likely to have been thrown off the job, and they have stockpiled savings in the recovery. Oh, other stuff we've talked about in the past. Companies like Amazon have gained market share as consumer habits have shifted. But at the bottom of the income spectrum, and in particular among Black and Latino families, millions of Americans are still feeling the deep pain of the recession. The economy remains nearly 10 million jobs short of its pre-pandemic peak, with women of all races and men of color struggling the most to regain employment. The unemployment rate for Black men remains above 10%. That is very high. Data from the Census Household Pulse Survey, analyzed by Lena Simmet, a senior researcher on poverty and inequality at Human Rights Watch, shows that the lingering economic distress of the crisis is concentrated among low earners and those who remain out of work. Nearly half of households earning below $35,000 a year reported falling behind on housing payments. 1/4 reported not having enough food. Mr. Biden's plan would shower those households with government assistance. Elizabeth Penn Cody, the policy director at Employ America, a group in Washington that backs the Biden plan, has calculated the benefits for several different hypothetical hard-hit Americans under the bill. For a working single mother of a 3-year-old who earns the federal minimum wage, just under $16,000 a year, the bill would provide as much as $4,775 in direct benefits. Ms. Penn Cody estimates that's huge. For a working single mother of a 3-year-old who earns the federal minimum wage of $16,000 a year. So let's imagine if you earn $16,000 a year, that bill would provide as much as $4,775 in direct benefits. I wonder if is that including like the entire child tax credit or just the increased part? Because $4,775, what does that come out to? That's like a little bit less than $400 a month. So yeah, $398 a month in extra on top. Poor people weren't eligible for the credit. Wait, poor people weren't eligible for what credit? What do you mean? MJ Kurt, you're on thin ice because you're ready to give us one bad take. It wasn't refundable. What wasn't refundable? The child tax credit? I'm almost positive the child tax credit is a refundable tax credit. Or are you talking about a different... No? Oh, it wasn't refundable. Now it is. Oh, okay. It was previously not refundable. Okay. Damn, that's pretty big. Jesus. For a family of 4 with one working parent and one... Okay, wait. So that means if you're a single working parent and you earn like $15,000 a year, you're never really getting the full child tax credit, right? Oh, fuck. Do refundable credit... Okay, I just need to look this up. I'm not going to answer. Do refundable credits apply before other credits? A taxpayer who has both refundable and non-refundable tax credits can maximize his total credit potential if he calculates non-refundable credit before applying his qualified. Non-refundable tax credit should be used first to minimize the taxes owed. Only after should the refundable taxes be applied to reduce the minimized amount even further if it falls below 0. Yeah, okay. Oh. So it just depends on your filing? Okay. Maybe? All right. For a family of 4 with one working parent and one who remains unemployed because of childcare constraints, the benefits could total $12,460. The Tax Policy Center in Washington estimates that the direct payment and expanded tax credits in the bill would, by themselves, increase after-tax income this year by more than 20% for an average household in the lowest quintile of income earners in the United States. It previously had forecast that Mr. Trump's tax cuts would raise the same group's income by less than 1% in the first year. It is as far away as you can get from regressive supply-side economics, said Senator Michael Benet, a Democrat of Colorado, a longtime champion of an expanded child tax credit to fight poverty. This is progressive economics that puts money in the hands of working people who will spend that money. Previous economic aid packages, including those signed by Mr. Trump last March, helped unemployed workers and low earners weather the crisis thus far, and even in many cases save some money. Research from the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute shows that low earners spent those savings down faster in the summer than higher earners, which suggests that they could use more money in the recovery, which would most likely put that money to work in the economy. I don't know that we really need to stimulate demand among high-earning families or families that haven't suffered financially, said Fiona Grieg, a president of the Institute. The Biden plan, particularly the direct payments, will provide some help to Americans who have not struggled financially over the past year, a fact the White House says is inevitable. Republicans, business groups, and many economists have criticized the direct payments to those on those grounds, even after Democrats moved this week to restrict checks to individuals earning less than $80,000 a year and households earning less than $160,000. And we saw this got moved down to $75,000 and $150,000. Republicans have also warned that the plan could discourage Americans from working, both by offering tax credits not tied to employment and by providing a $300 per week supplement to unemployment benefits that runs through the start of September, which critics say could effectively pay people more to stay at home than they would get on the job. Research from economists at the University of Chicago and the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute found little evidence that a temporary round of $600 supplemental benefits that Mr. Trump signed into law last year discouraged the unemployed from taking jobs. There is a risk that the disincentive could be larger this year if the economy opens rapidly and jobs become widely available, said Peter Ganong, a University of Chicago economist who was one of the paper's authors. There's also a risk, he said, that the economy will not reopen as quickly as hoped if, for example, new strains of the virus prove resistant to vaccines. In that case, the supplemental benefits could help people stay in their homes, put food on the table, and keep the consumer spending engine of the economy running. Okay. I feel like we should do a quick Wall Street Journal read, because the Wall Street Journal is probably going to be a bit more conservative. So maybe we get like a little bit of a better look from the other side. This is more or less what we read from before. $22 billion in rental assistance, $5 billion to homeless aid, $10 billion to help homeowners pay mortgages. This is just like a more precise breakdown. All right. The mini summary, so we know what to look for in the video. So basically the $1.9 trillion, so a huge chunk of it, over $300 billion, is going to shore up state and local budgets, is number one. Number two is a lot of stimulus to low-income families. So $1,400 checks to people making below $75,000 a year, tapers off to $80,000 a year. Refundable child tax credits, I think an expansion of unemployment, another $300 a week. A lot of targeted aid towards this had a lot of targeted aids towards we had rental assistance, homelessness aid, homeowners mortgage stuff, $125 billion to help K-12 schools, money set aside for childcare providers, help for COBRA and the ACA stuff. Your cap for how much money you're expected to spend on health insurance was brought down to 8.5% at the highest I think we saw. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of aid. How do people feel about it? Oh boy.
This $1.9 trillion monstrosity that was just unleashed by the federal government is a radical shift in the nature of the relationship between the government and the individual. It involves a massive bailout to all of the states and localities that have done a horrible job running their own business. It has also created essentially a brand new welfare program. Okay, the welfare program rolls back welfare reform. Welfare reform in the 1990s was designed to get people off the welfare rolls and encourage people to work. And there was a lot of talk at the time, well, this is going to create child poverty. It didn't create child poverty. All it did was push people back to work. Well, the new plan from Joe Biden, this stimulus bill, essentially creates a baseline universal basic income for people with kids. Now, it is not connected to work. It is not connected to unemployment. It is not connected to anything. It's a new entitlement, okay? And the way that you can tell it's a new entitlement is the way the media are talking about it. It's supposed to sunset next year, but Republicans are then going to be in the position of saying, okay, it needs to go away. And Democrats know this, which is why they passed it in the first place. The New York Times calls it a policy revolution in aid for children. According to Jason...
So to be clear, the UBI that he's talking about is $3,600 for one child, 5 or below. So that comes out to, what, $300 a month in UBI for one child? Unless we're going to say that all tax credits or all refundable tax credits are UBI, that's kind of silly to make that claim. Is it supposed to be bad because he says the word UBI? Or I guess he's trying to say that it disincentivizes work maybe. But I mean, like, unemployment can only run for so long. You can't be on unemployment forever. And then tax credits for children have like always existed. We've always had tax credits. They weren't refundable, but.
To Parle. A year ago, Anique Hope, a single mother in suburban Atlanta, was working as a letter carrier, running a side business catering picnics, and settling into a rent-to-own home in Stone Mountain, Georgia, where she thought her boys would flourish in class and excel on the football field. Then the pandemic closed the schools, the boys' grades collapsed with distance learning. She quit work to stay home in hopes of breaking their fall. Expecting unemployment aid that never came, she lost her utilities, ran short on food, was recovering from an immobilizing bout of COVID when a knock brought marshals with eviction papers. Depending on when the snapshot is dated, Ms. Hope might appear as a striving emblem of upward mobility or a mother on the verge of homelessness. But in either guise, she's among the people Democrats seek to help with a mold-breaking plan on the verge of congressional passage to provide most parents a monthly check of up to $300 per child. Obscured by other parts of President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package, the child benefit has the makings of a policy revolution. See, this is the thing. There's a lot in there. Okay, it is not just that people who are unemployed get checks. That would make some sense. Right? If you're talking about the government forcing people into unemployment lines, then the government compensating them for forcing them into unemployment lines makes some sense. That is a taking. When the government takes your job, the government has to compensate you for the taking of your job. Okay, but what we are talking about now is setting up what is effectively a permanent welfare program. Though framed in technocratic terms as an expansion of an existing tax credit, it's essentially a guaranteed income for families with kids akin to children's allowances that are common in other rich countries. It's just
well, but I mean, like, it is an expansion of a tax credit. Like, why are you framing this as an expansion of a tax credit? Well, because it is an expansion of a tax credit. Like, the child tax credit already existed. It was $2,000 per child. Like, now they're just making it more. They're making it refundable. That is interesting. And that can be, I guess, like a stronger, but it's still like an expansion of said tax credit. Like,
just like Europe. So that means it's good. The basic idea here is that the child tax credit, which used to be applied against the taxes you paid, right? That's why it's called a tax credit. If you didn't pay taxes, you didn't get the child tax credit. Well, now it doesn't matter whether you pay taxes. You still get what we're going to lie about and call a tax credit.
What does refundable mean? Okay, a tax deduction. Let's say that we have $40,000 that we earn, okay? What a tax deduction allows me to do is a tax deduction allows me to get rid of money that I would owe taxes on. Okay, ready? So real quick, I'm gonna say the difference between a tax deduction and a tax credit, okay? Tax credit, tax deduction. So let's say that I earn $40,000 in income, and let's say that through, let's say random stuff, let's say that we get tax deductions so that we have $15,000 worth of tax deductions, okay? Let's say that I have $40,000 in income. Let's say that on this $40,000 in income, let's say that I owe, we'll say $15,000 in taxes, okay? We owe this much, all right? A $15,000 tax deduction would make it so that on $40,000, instead, I would knock off $15,000 and I would only have to pay taxes on $25,000 of income. A tax deduction reduces your taxable income. So if I have $40,000 in income and I have a $15,000 tax deduction, well, now I only have to pay taxes on $25,000 in income. That's a tax deduction, okay? It does not reduce the tax that you owe. It just reduces your taxable income, which then reduces the tax you owe, if that makes sense. A tax credit, let's say that I earn $40,000 income, and then let's say that I have to pay $15,000 in taxes, okay? Let's say that I have $2,000 tax credit. A tax credit reduces the amount of tax that you owe. So if I owe $15,000 and I get a $2,000 tax credit, now I only owe $13,000. So a tax deduction reduces your taxable income. A tax credit reduces your tax liability. Let's say that you have so many tax credits and so little income. Let's say that you only earn $20,000, and let's say that for some reason you only owe $1,000 in taxes. Let's say that you have $2,000 in tax credits, right? Well, here, your tax liability would go to 0. So now you owe no money. However, some tax credits are refundable. If you have a refundable tax credit, that means that even if your tax liability goes to $0, you can actually get money from the government if it's a refundable tax credit. So let's say that this $2,000 is from the earned income tax credit. Basically, you get money based on how much you earn when you're a low income earner. It's supposed to incentivize work, right? The way that this works is, let's say that this $2,000 is refundable. Let's say I have a $1,000 tax liability. Well, at the end of filing my taxes, the government will actually owe me $1,000 because this tax credit is refundable. That's how the earned income tax credit works, okay? Okay, tax credit, refundable tax credit, tax deductions, okay.
If you didn't pay taxes, you didn't get the child tax credit. Well, now, it doesn't matter whether you pay taxes, you still get what we're going to lie about and call a tax credit. It's not a tax credit, because you're not paying taxes, it's just a redistribution check. The plan establishes the benefit for a single year, but if it becomes permanent, says the New York Times, as Democrats intend, it will greatly enlarge the safety net for the poor and the middle class at a time when the volatile modern economy often leaves families moving between those groups. More than 93% of children, 69 million, would receive benefits under the plan at a one-year cost of more than $100 billion. It raises the maximum benefit most families will receive by up to 80% per child, extends it to millions of families whose earnings are currently too low to qualify under existing law, because again, it was a child tax credit. So they're just backdooring. Right? They're saying this is not it's not a child tax credit anymore. Now it is a check. Now, one of the things that the government did in the 1960s.
I mean, it's still like people have such bad ways of looking at money, especially poor people, and then especially politicians, I guess. People have such a bad way of looking at like, well, that's not a tax credit. That's just a check to you. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's all income and liability. At the end of the day, really, you're either earning money or you're paying money, or you earn money and you owe money. And like, whether somebody gives you a check or whether somebody knocks off part of your tax bill, or like, at the end of the day, it's all really the same shit. But like, man, dude, the way that you phrase it will fucking trigger the fuck out of some people, dude. Like, if I give you like an extra bill for $5 versus I just like increase by 5% like some $100 bill, like people look at it so fucking differently. Yeah, holy shit. I think that I'm a little bit less comfortable talking about this. I think that one of the reasons why economies prefer interest, or why they try to avoid like deflationary spirals during economic downturns, is because if you have a group of people working a job under a firm, people would rather you fire one employee and keep 10 than make it so that all 11 employees take a pay cut. Because people do not want to see the amount of money they earn go down. But if the economy inflates enough because of monetary policy or whatever, and there's enough inflation that your wages effectively fall, but you don't see an actual cut in pay, people are okay with that. Like the way that people like look at money is like very stupid, just in terms of like how people like view money.
Is they dramatically increase the single motherhood rate in both the black and the white communities. In 1960, the black single motherhood rate was 20%. Today, it's in excess of 70%. In the white community,
I don't think that's the point he's making. He's saying that they're trying to hide giving checks to people under the term tax credit, seemingly to make it pass more easily. In the end, he's just against giving them a check straight up. Yeah, sure. But then, like, I feel like you should just argue against that. Like, if you want to argue against that, just say, like, listen, I don't think there should be any tax credits ever for people with children. We shouldn't incentivize poor people to make children. Because that sounds like the argument that he really wants to make. But if you want to make that argument, then make that argument. Let's deal with that. Do you think that we should get rid of all forms of like child tax credits or child tax deductions or whatever, or dependent deductions? Should head of household filing be gone? Like, if you want to get rid of those tax classifications, then fine, yeah, do that. But why? But don't hide it with this like bullshit language. Like, oh, well, they're lying about expanding like a tax credit to give people checks. And it's like, oh, well, I mean, like that's more or less how tax credits are anyways. The government giving you a check, you just don't really see it. It's at the end of the year, you have a lower liability, or you get a tax refund, right? Destiny, it's cool to hear you say that because my Econ 101 teacher told us basically that word for word. Well, cool. You know, we strive to do Econ 101 here, so.
Community, the white single motherhood rate was somewhere on the order of 5%. Today, it's in excess of 40%. That is specifically because of welfare policies that incentivize people to have kids.
Citation needed. Okay, hardcore citation needed, okay? You cannot just say that, like, well, look, the reason why there's so many single families today is because of tax policy, all right?
To not have a husband in the home. Because if the income got too high, you didn't get the credit from the welfare program. This is not quite that, but the similarities are pretty stunning. While the current program distributes money annually as a tax reduction to families with income tax liability or a check to those too poor to owe income taxes, the new program would send both groups monthly checks to provide a more stable cash flow. By the standards of previous days' debate, of previous aid debates, opposition has been surprisingly muted. The bill hasn't won any Republican votes, but critics have focused on other elements of the rescue package. Some conservatives call the child benefit welfare and warn that it's going to bust budgets and weaken incentives to work or to marry, which of course is correct. When the government becomes a parent and essentially is footing all your bills, then your incentive to actually create an upwardly mobile family unit is greatly lessened. You see less income mobility, less family formation, less productive, I would say less productive trajectory for children in a situation in which the government plays father.
There's probably a lot of reasons why people are having less and less children, or why people prefer to stay in single households, or why people aren't getting married. Like, there's probably reasons for this. I don't think it's all related to tax policy in the government. Like, I find that very, very, very hard to believe.
It's a problem. Okay, but Democrats are pushing that forward. So it's a reversion back to 1960 standards of how the war on poverty was to be fought. By the way, we have now spent $22 trillion in the war on poverty over the course of the war on poverty, and we have not budged the percentage of people who are living below the poverty line in the United States pretty much at all. The economic shock and racial protests of the past year brought new momentum to the plan, says the New York Times, whose reach, while broad, would especially help Black and Latino families who are crucial to the Democrats' coalition. Okay, so in other words, it's a specialized giveaway to a particular voting bloc that Biden wants to help out. Mr. Biden's embrace of the subsidies is a leftward shift.
Okay, people always say this like it's bad, but like, that's kind of what you're supposed to do. Like, you are supposed to appease your voting bloc. Like, that's kind of the point of being a fucking elected politician. That's what you do in a democracy, right? Like, when Trump fucking holds the Bible upside down and pretends like he's ever opened it in his entire fucking life, like, of course it's to appease your voting bloc. Like, well, yeah. Like, this, like, it's funny because when you reframe their arguments, it's so stupid. Like, this fucking guy is basically approving a bunch of policy to win support and the popularity over people that vote for him. Like, well, yeah, of course. Like, what the fuck do you think the Trump tax cuts were, you fucking moron? Like, that's the whole point. That's the whole fucking point of government policy, is to do things that the people that voted for you like you to do. Like, no fucking shit. Like, what the fuck? Does appeasing a voting bloc make it good? That's the point of an elected politician, is to appease your voters. We live in a democracy. Yeah, of course, that's what you're supposed to do.
To help out. Mr. Biden's embrace of the subsidies is a leftward shift for a Democratic Party that made deep cuts in cash aid in the 90s under the theme of ending welfare. As a senator, Biden...
Is this 8 minute... Is this 8... Why couldn't he have just... Okay, I think it would have been way more based if Ben Shapiro got some fucking crazy music in the background, dressed up in some crazy black cloak, and just fucking screamed into the camera for 8 minutes, like, welfare queen, welfare queen, welfare queen. Like, why not just do that for 8.5? Why, like, do this? Like, make a ContraPoints video out of it, okay? Call Abigail. Make it entertaining to watch instead of this weird Coach Red Pill camera angles with the zooming camera around the office. I don't know why we're doing this. Like, we're point of view, you snuck a drone into, like, Angry Shapiro's office to listen to him rant about welfare queen. Like, why not just do that for 8 minutes?
As a senator, Biden supported the 1996 welfare restrictions. As recently as August, his campaign was non-committal about the child benefit. Now, the president promotes projections that the monthly checks, up to $300 for young children and $250 for those over 5, would cut poverty by 45% for children and by more than 50% among Black families. Okay, so here's the question. Is that true? Because we've had these sorts of benefits before. It has not cut poverty. It turns out that you can sign checks to these families, and that doesn't mean that poverty is going to be cut in the end. Because in order to get out of poverty, you actually have to make a...
I wish I knew more. I wish I knew more about this in terms of, like, how effective the war on poverty has been. Like, I know we haven't made much progress maybe recently, but I mean, like, it seems like it's helped a little bit, no? But I would have to read more than just, like, a single chart. I know there are people linking me stuff in chat, but I don't feel like going off into, like, how beneficial have we been in terms of war on poverty, but...
series of decisions that get you out of poverty over time. It is not merely a question of signing people checks. If it were merely a question of signing people checks, again, $22 trillion spent over the last 60 years in the United States would have been a pretty good way to alleviate poverty. It has not alleviated poverty in the United States. In fact, the Black middle class was growing faster in the 1950s than it has after.
This is also really boring too, because Shapiro was a smart guy. I'm pretty sure he is. Maybe he's not. I'm not sure. Like, I don't think anybody thinks that just giving people money is the way to fix anything, right? But it's also like, it's probably also not good to just, like, tell people to get jobs either, right? Like, the way that you fix poverty is probably by improving, like, institutions in the United States and then getting people more engaged with those institutions. So having like a healthier labor market, having a better system of education, having more reproductive control and family planning access. Like these are probably the things that lead to a more productive society. And I think that like certain forms of cash infusions can work to build that. So for instance, if we look at the last coronavirus bill, all of the funding for education or whatever, like especially K through 12 and college stuff, things like that probably go towards building a better society. Right? That's probably a direct example of it.
After that, thanks largely to the intervention of the federal government in welfare programs like this. But again, this is the kind of policy that Joe Biden is now pushing, or at least his administration is, while he's asleep on the couch or at the Denny's for the early bird dinner. So that is a major policy shift for Biden. And of course, he's going to be championing that tonight. He's going to deliver a primetime address on Thursday.
Is this literally the only thing we're going over in the stimulus bill? You just don't like the expansion of the child tax credit? Like,
actually, marking the first anniversary of the virus restrictions. And he's going to champion his own role in overcoming the virus. Now, here's the thing. His own role in overcoming the virus has been pretty limited. And you want an indicator of just what Joe Biden has done on a personal level? There were supposed to be 100 mass vaccination sites set up by the federal government by the end of February. By the end of February, there were 7. The systems were in place. It is governors who have been doing the heavy lifting here. All the federal government could do was help actually obtain the vaccines and the dosages. Any federal government worth its salt would have done all of that. But
the only thing the federal government did was it got the vaccines and distributed them. But it's been the governors that have been setting up the vaccination sites. I feel like that's probably a pretty big part of it. Like, all you did was get the vaccines. Like, okay.
You're going to see a victory lap here by Joe Biden. And again, this is a heady time because we're spending all the money. And that's fine. We're going to spend all the money and it's going to all be great because we're going to spend all the money. We did this in the 60s.
I also like this line. Hold on.
Any federal government worth its salt, women could do. The systems were in place. It is governors who have been doing the heavy lifting here. All the federal government could do was help actually obtain the vaccines and the dosages. Any federal government worth its salt would have done all of that. But
I mean, it seems like people have had a lot of trouble getting the vaccine. I don't know about that one, Benny boy. I mean, like, you can say that. Well, any government would have gotten all the fucking vaccines. I don't know, man. It seems like there's a lot of our brothers, a lot of our pure white angels over in Europe seem to have a lot of trouble with that. I'm not sure.
You're going to see a victory lap here by Joe Biden. And again, this is a heady time because we're spending all the money. And that's fine. We're going to spend all the money. It's going to all be great because we're going to spend all the money. We did this in the 60s. Okay, in the 1960s, we blew out the spending. If you look at the growth rates in the early 60s and GDP in the American economy, very, very high. That was because the rest of the world had been devastated by World War II. They were still trying to move beyond their own socialistic policies. Many of them had to curb those policies. In the 1960s, the United States decided it was going to become a social democratic country. It was going to become much more European in its view of the welfare state. We blew out the domestic spending. We actually blew out military spending as well for a period there. And we ended up with the stagnation of the 1970s, an awful time for economics, so bad that there was a backlash in the form of the Reagan Revolution in the 1980s. So that is what we are about to relive. We're basically just reliving the mid-1960s to late 1970s. And this began over the course of the past couple of years with the pandemic. It began with the...
Why do Americans feel like it is so unattainable for us to just have a few of the worker-related policies that exist in Europe? Why is it that somebody working at McDonald's in France can get 5 or 6 weeks of paid vacation? Or why is it that somebody working at Max in Sweden is able to get like a fucking year maternity leave? Or what, like, we really can't do any of this in the US? Why is it that anybody in Germany can get sick and go to the hospital and have to pay a small fee for it, and in the U.S. you're like bankrupt? Like we can't do any of this. We really can't. It's just out of reach for America. We're just so special. We're just such a special people. We just can't do any of this. Like
with the racial protests and riots in America's major cities, it feels very much like about 1968 right now. It feels a lot like that in terms of where we are and what the next decade is going to look like. And of course, Joe Biden is in on it. I mean, he's loving this stuff. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that the Ben Shapiro show is...
All right, well, we've got Ben hates welfare queens. Man, I guess the nice thing about big legislation is there's something in it for everybody to just fucking hate against. All right, who do we have next? Who else are we suffering through? Oh, God.
So the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill is it passed the Senate. It's going to pass the House. Probably already has by the time you're watching this. And I don't want to give people the wrong impression as to this bill. There's a lot of good stuff in this bill.
Good job. All right.
People need the help. You have the $3,000 child tax credit, which would cut child poverty in half. You have the $300.
I think it's I think it's $3,600 tax credit for under age 5. Okay. 3,000 for, I think it was 5 to 15 or something. Or was it under age 7? Yeah. Okay. We're everything Kulinski said gets hardcore fact check, but we'll let him slide on that one. It's okay. He's
per month unemployment. That was $400, but Joe Manchin weaseled his way into reducing that. You have the $1,400 stimulus checks. You have relief for states that were getting obliterated as a result of COVID. The other part that nobody really talks about, but I think it's one of the most important parts of this bill, is that it basically saves over 1 million people's pensions. So that's huge. So again, I don't want to give everybody the wrong impression about this bill. This bill, in many ways, is a phenomenal piece of legislation. And I'm trying to pull up, as I talk to you guys right now, I'm trying to...
Okay, this is... Good job, Kulinski. Not falling too far off the edge.
See if I can find... There's a Jeff Stein tweet. Here we go. Jeff Stein of the Washington Post. Here's what he says. It's a new analysis of Biden's stimulus. Poverty falls by 42% for black people as a result of this bill, 39% for Hispanic people, and 34% for white people. Overall, the bill lowers the poverty rate from 13.7% to 8.7%. So listen, that's amazing. And I like what Internet Hippo said about this. He says, so the government really has a reduced poverty dial that they could just crank? Yeah, they do. They do. And so it's almost inexcusable that they even left 8.7% of people in poverty. We should eliminate poverty. You know.
So the classic, true. It should have been 10 trillion in stimulus. Okay.
Poverty is a choice. It's a policy choice that we've made. Now, thankfully, we made the decision to reduce it, but we could eliminate it if we really wanted to. So anyway, there's some good stuff in the bill, but keep it real, man. The two most important big ticket items that were the selling point of the bill are not in the bill. $2,000 stimulus checks, that was reduced to $1,400. The Weasley move where they said, you already got $600, so it's going to be $2,000 total. Nonsense.
I want to talk real quick about this. Because AOC jumped on this too, and it's a little bit annoying. When Biden was originally promising $2,000 checks, what the promise was, before the checks came out, it was supposed to be $2,000. And then after the $600 checks came out, AOC and Ilhan Omar themselves suggested an amendment. Let's do it. Rashid Tlaib and I already co-wrote the COVID amendment for $2,000 checks, so it's ready to go. Glad to see the president is willing to support our legislation. We can pass $2,000 checks this week if the Senate GOP agrees to stand down. In Section 6428A of the IRS Code 1986, blah, 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 blah. Okay, in subsection A1, strike $600, $1,200 in the case of eligible individuals filing a direct return, and insert $2,000. AOC's original proposal that everybody jumped on board was changing the $600 to $2,000. It wasn't $600 plus $2,000. That is just like not true. That's what the $2,000 legislative effort was in relation to. It wasn't that everybody got $600 checks and now now I know $2,000 sounds good and that's like what's on everybody's like fucking minds, but like yeah, it's really annoying that people are like trying to turn this around as like Biden like lied to us or whatever. According to Bernie Sanders,
we have promised the American people. We've said two things in the last month. We said we're going to get you $2,000, and that's $600 plus $1,400. And what we have promised the American, and what
they lowered the unemployment by $100, but extended it till September. Kyle is lying, saying it's Joe Manchin lowered the unemployment checks. Oh, sure, okay. I mostly agree, but it looks bad optically since the main selling point of voting for Warnock and Ossoff was they're going to $2,000 period. I guess, but it's not technically true, but I guess bad optically. But mainly bad optically because pundits like this guy like will scream at you about how bad optically it is. But sorry, I just wanted to talk about that for a second.
$2,000 checks and the $15 minimum wage. It's not in there. So now you're going to hear the conversation going on in elite media about this. You're going to see Morning Joe and one other MSNBC show. Look at how they're talking about the left in relation to this bill.
And how are they dealing with their own party? I know that there were actually progressives that were complaining that this didn't do enough. There was some fighting going back and forth, attacks against Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. How do they feel those back and forths are going? I would think almost every progressive, even just looking at Steve's charts, every progressive has to understand this is the most historic piece of legislation to help working class and middle class Americans that this country has put forward in decades.
Well, there was certainly some sarcastic behind-the-scenes commentary about Senate Majority Leader Joe Manchin, considering the senator from West Virginia's outsized influence on the process right now. Those in the West Wing weren't always delighted about that, but they recognize that the deals had to get made. And in terms of attacks from the left, they are actually really grateful for the support of Bernie Sanders, who they believe has really given them progressive cover here. That yes, there are some on the very left portions of the party in the House who have some complaints, who might make a little bit of noise this week, but they feel like if Bernie Sanders is on board with this and released a statement afterwards touting how historic it was and how necessary it was, the progressives will fall in line too.
The COVID relief package vote seems to be sliding by a day as they try to get the text together for it. Do you see any challenges on the horizon getting this back through the House? I mean, progressives have been critical of Joe Manchin for essentially forcing them to negotiate with themselves, lowering that unemployment number. Do you see any problems? Or, I mean, I have a hard time imagining someone's going to stand up and say, yeah, actually, I'm going to stand in the way of the Democratic president's first major priority.
No, I mean, if it were Republicans, they probably would, and they would hold out for that last $100 a week in unemployment insurance that Joe Manchin and Senate Democrats cut. I do think it's going to pass, Casey. I think it's going to pass easily. But remember, I mean, Nancy Pelosi has a 5-seat margin before she is in big trouble or before she can't pass a bill. But no, I do think the progressive left is going to stay with Joe Biden here and is going to deliver him his victory without much turbulence. I was a bit surprised about that. I thought that there would be more kind of tumult on the left, but there's not. And that's a big win for Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden to get this bill across the finish line this week. I was skeptical, and we've talked about it before, that they would get this done by the March 14th deadline. But here we are, and it looks like they're going to.
That is colossally depressing. It really is. It really is. So in the first clip there, they discuss how Bernie Sanders gave Joe Biden progressive cover on this bill. Bernie is giving his good friend Joe progressive cover. They say in the second clip, effectively, hey, the left is going to fall in line. There's a part where he says, quote, if they were Republicans, they probably would fight. If they were Republicans, they wouldn't fall in line. They would hold out for what they wanted. And then he starts laughing.
Well, because if they were Republicans and you have a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress, then of course you'll hold out and fight because you know it would make the Democrats look fucking horrible if you stalled a coronavirus relief bill to try to fight for some relatively minor stuff in the bill. Talking about the $100 unemployment. Now, if you're talking about the 15-hour minimum wage thing, this is just never, ever, ever happening. I like how he's going to compare. I don't know if he's going to do it, but I like how he's about to compare. No, maybe he won't do it. It sounds like he's about to say progressives should fight like Republicans. Like, well, the progressives don't want to destroy the entire Democratic agenda. They just want to push it further left. They don't want to be destructive obstructionists like Republicans are. But maybe he won't. Maybe Kulinski is about to surprise us with his political prowess. Okay, let's hear it. Hold on.
He laughs. He's laughing at the left. He says, without much turbulence. Then he says, I was surprised. I was surprised that, the left is basically falling in line with a whimper here. Not much fight. Honestly, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Now, Ro Khanna, a few days ago, or last week or something, drafted a letter and sent the letter to the Biden White House. And the letter basically said, we want that $15 minimum wage in there. You should overrule the parliamentarian. Over 20 House Democrats signed that bill. Over 20. But then Ro went on in an interview to say, hey, if the $15 minimum wage doesn't make it into the bill, yeah, I'll probably vote for the bill anyway. So in other words, you wrote a letter suggesting to the Biden White House to overrule the parliamentarian who said, oh, $15 minimum wage can't be in there. Why the fuck would they ever listen to your suggestion? Why would they listen to your There's no reason for them to listen to your suggestion. You're going to say, thanks, Ro, we're done here. We're going to go in the other direction. Why? Because they don't want to do a $15 minimum wage. The part that's so frustrating is this. Over 20 House Democrats signed that letter. If those over 20 House Democrats voted as a block, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill would not be able to pass. It is a must-pass bill. So you know what?
What? Okay, so he did exactly what I didn't truly believe he could do. But so he's just saying that the Democrat, like whatever concessions you make to those people on the far left are not going to be accepted by the people on the right. So what do? Do you just... Do you just say, fuck it? We're just not going to pass COVID relief until, like...
But they would have had to take a seat at the table and figure out a way to get the House Democrats on board to vote for the bill. And the House...
To get the House Democrats on board, how are you going to bring the Republicans on board?
Democrats could have said, there's more of us that are mandating the $15 minimum wage be in the bill than there are those that say it shouldn't be in the bill. So it's on you, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
It's almost like he thinks that this bill was literally just about well, no, he opened the start talking about all the good things of the bill. Here is a better question. Here's what I wish. Not a single Republican voted for it, did they? Not in the Senate. I don't know in the House. But like, here's something that I wish you could ask Kyle Kulinski. Kyle, what would you have wanted them to cut from the bill in order to pass $15 minimum wage? Do you want to cut the $135 billion to schools? Do you want to cut the $1,400 checks? Do you want to cut the $3,000 to $3,600 child tax credits? Do you want to cut the fact that they were made refundable? Do you want to cut the $330 billion to state? What do you want to cut? What do you want to trash in that bill to try to fight for your $15 minimum wage? Which, by the way, still has no chance of passing the Senate or the House. By the way, it doesn't. Like, what do you want to cut in that bill Because you talk about negotiating all the time. All these lefty cucks always talk about, oh, you go to the negotiating table. What do you want to cut that's going to make that bill survive and get every single member of your party on board with it?
To get to work.
It won't pass the House. It won't pass the Senate. If the bill goes from the Senate to the House, there were 8 Democrats. So you would have to get some Republicans on board with your legislation, right? Or I don't even know how you do it. There were 8. My understanding is there were 8 Democrats who said they wouldn't sign on to a 15-hour minimum wage. Hold on, we can check. Democrats, Senate, no 15-hour minimum wage. I think there were 8, weren't there? Oh, here it is. The 8 Democrats who voted no on the 15-an-hour minimum wage. There's no way that this was ever passing. Like,
go talk to Joe Manchin. Go talk to Kirsten Sinema. Go talk to the 8 ones in the Senate.
Oh,
Chris Coons is supposed to be like a bestie of Biden. Go talk to your boy, son. Go talk to your boy. And you play politics. So you say to them, listen, we could be best friends or we could be worst enemies. What do you want in order to support the $15 minimum wage? You tell me and I'm going to deliver on it. What do you want? You want something special for Delaware, Chris Coons? Okay, let's talk about what you want. What do you want money allocated for? I got you. Go talk to Joe Manchin. Joe, what do you want, man? What do you want? You want some sort of provision in the infrastructure bill that mandates double the amount of money goes to West Virginia? Is that what you want? I can make that happen, dog. I can make that happen. It's a carrot and stick approach. You can either be their best friend or their worst enemy. If you cross me on this...
I feel like Kulinski thinks that Biden could literally have passed any piece of legislation he wants. Like, Biden could pass the mandatory waifus that we all so want if only he would just wheel and deal in fucking Congress. Biden could pass literally anything he wants if he's just willing to wheel and deal a little bit.
And if you don't vote for the $15 minimum wage, listen, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. You're going to support it. But if you don't support it, I'm going to make your life a living hell and your career in Washington, D.C. is over. And I'm going to take my 62% approval rating and campaign directly against you and support a primary opponent against you as well. I like them apples. This is how you play politics. This is what you do.
I also like this idea that, like, the way that you play politics is we need to go primary our own people when we have a 50-vote majority in the Senate. By virtue of the representative, we have 51 to 50 votes in the Senate, and he wants to talk about primarying other Democrats. That's what we're going to spend our time on 2022. We're going to spend our time in 2022 with the president going around trying to primary friendly Democrats, not expand our margins in the Senate, not get an actual margin in the House. We're just going to spend all of our time primarying other moderate Dems in West Virginia, by the way.
But guess what? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were never going to fucking do that unless they were forced to do that. The only people who had the power to force them to do that were those over 20 House Democrats who could have voted as a bloc. Said, no, we're not supporting this bill. You said $15 minimum wage. You said it. I didn't make you say it. You said it. It's a 67% issue according to a poll from 2019. 67% of the country supports it. You're going to do what you promised, and I'm going to...
It sounds like he watched like an episode of House of Cards, and he's like, oh, we're not going to do proportional response. We're going to fucking blah, blah. Like that's honestly what it sounds like, is he watched like too many episodes of House of Cards. He's like, I know how to do all of politics. We just got to go hard.
Make you do what you promised. You said $15 minimum wage. We're not voting for this bill unless it has a $15 minimum wage in there. They didn't fight. You want to know why Joe Manchin always gets what he wants? Because he says, I'm not going to fucking vote for it unless it's what I want. So why are the House Democrats not doing that? You say you all want $15 minimum wage. Prove it. Fight for it. 67% of the country. If you're not going to fight on this, you're not going to fight on anything. And it's pathetic. Even elite corporate media. You heard how they were talking about you. Bernie gave Biden progressive cover. Thank you, Bernie, for folding and not fighting for the $15 minimum wage. They're gonna fall in line. If they were Republicans, they would probably fight. Oh, I was surprised that, with very little turbulence, that they're all going to fall in line. You guys are embarrassing, man. You guys are embarrassing. And you know what? I think the reason why they don't want to do it, honestly, is because it's hard. It is hard. If you fight for $15 minimum wage, you know what's going to happen? All of Democratic leadership is going to rain holy hell down on you. You're going to have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden put you on their enemies list. That's what they're going to do. The media is going to try to slit...
Why does he think didn't Biden say he was for $15-an-hour minimum wage? Didn't he say that on the campaign trail? Didn't we hear him say this multiple times? I thought Biden has said, so I'm curious if I'm so curious what Kyle thinks about it. Does Kyle think that Biden lied about the 15-hour minimum wage and he wants to keep people in poverty? Or it's a big QAnon conspiracy? I'm going a little bit far, but I'm so curious, how conspiratorial are you? Why do you think he publicly states his support for the minimum wage? And I want to know what the conspiracy is there in his brain for why he kind of supports it and kind of doesn't. I'm super curious about that. This is what populism does to your brain.
Your throat. They're going to try to absolutely destroy you. But you know what? This is one of those issues where it doesn't matter how deep the propaganda is and how much they come after you. You are on the moral high ground if you fight for it, because you are representing 67% of the American people who don't want the minimum wage to not be a living wage anymore. You're fighting for the basic principle that if you work full time, you should make enough money to survive. That's what you're fighting for. You should love to take on that fight. You should bathe in the hatred of corporate media and the hatred of democratic leadership. Are you kidding me? I would lean into this fight like you've never seen before. I'd say, I dare you to take me on this fight. I dare you. You want to debate it? Let's debate it. Did you know that if the minimum wage kept up with productivity, it'd be over $20 an hour today, and you're putting up a fight over 15? 15. They don't want to do it because it's hard. Sorry, listen, I know a lot of these people who are the left-wing Congress people. They care about what the media says about them. They do. They do. They want positive press. They don't want negative press. They care about what leadership thinks of them. They want pats on the head from leadership. They don't want to fight with leadership. So then listen, just acknowledge and admit you're not leaders. You're followers. Admit it. It's a fact. It's a fact. Leaders would fight on this. Leaders would take the fire from the media, would take the fire from leadership. That should be what you want to do. You should want that fight. And I don't care if it's the Republicans or if it's Democrats who are blocking me. You are my enemy on this issue if you're not for $15 minimum wage. Again, if you're not going to fight for this, you're not going to fight for anything. So pack it up. It's over. You know, the only stuff we're going to get through is the stuff
if you're not going to fight for literally what would be the most extreme. Is this what he does? Does he just like... Well, Bernie saved Joe Biden and the left fell in line. Okay. I was going to say, because like, I wonder if this... Because he doesn't even really talk about the COVID-19 legislation. It's just... I wonder how many videos... I wonder if I were to go through like the past like 2 years of Kyle Kulinski videos, how much he just tries to shoehorn Medicare for all or 15 an hour minimum wage into every single fucking video. If that's like all he talks about.
Fucking Joe Manchin allows. So we basically have a moderate Republican president in Joe Biden and Joe Manchin, who's really the president. That's what we have.
Then expand your lead. Why don't you go take your little justice Dems and go win in some like competitive areas? Don't just primary Dems in safe districts. Like expand our margins. That's how you get legislation passed. Welcome to democracy.
And, you know, some people might be okay with that little pocket change. I'm not okay with that. And working people aren't okay with that. And the world can't wait for that. So, you know.
Well, I guess we'll see how popular this legislation is. And we'll see how much, like, the working people like it, huh?
Honestly, it really is just pathetic. It's pathetic. If you're not going to fight for this, you're not going to fight for anything. So, there's nothing else to say except your failures. Now, I told you, there's stuff in that bill that's good. It was a must-pass bill, which is why this was the time to fight for $15 minimum wage. If you're not going to get it now, you're never going to get it. You're not going to fight for it now, so you're never going to get it.
Wait, why? If it's so popular in America, if there's so much political pressure, if so many people want this, if we can do, why won't you get it later? Why can't you get it in its own bill? Or why can't you get it as part of another bill? Why is it so impossible to get like when you tell me the only fucking way you're getting 15 an hour is if you pass in this must-pass fucking do or die fucking bill, kind of make it sound like it's really not that popular. You make it sound like it's not that politically possible. If this is the only way that it's going to happen.
You know what's likely to happen now? Either nothing on the $15, nothing on raising the minimum wage, or if they do something, it'll be this pathetic. You ready? They'll try to do some shit through regular order where they raise it to like $11 an hour, $10 an hour, $11 an hour, maybe even 10 because they've got to get some Republicans to get over 60 votes, right? So they're raising
an 11 or 12 an hour minimum wage hike would be based as fuck, by the way, if you were making like anywhere near minimum wage. That would actually be sick. Now, Kyle Kulinski, who makes millions of dollars a year on YouTube, might not think anything about it because he doesn't have any fucking idea what the average person earns or cares about, but...
to $10 an hour. They'll also link it to median wage increases or inflation. So you know what that does? It's an automatic raise year by year. Now, you say, Kyle, I don't know, that sounds pretty good to me, right? I mean, automatic raises, that's wonderful. You want to know why they would take this approach and why they would do it? Raising it from $7.25 to $10 or $11. $10 or $11 is still not a living wage. So you work full time and you still don't make enough money to survive. And
well, first of all, that's probably not true in every area. And also 15 an hour, depending on what you're talking about, probably wouldn't be a living. What do you even consider like a living wage? What does that even necessarily mean? Like, I'm curious what he means by that. I wonder what 12 an hour would look like in Nebraska. So 12 an hour times 40 hours a week times 52 weeks, 25,000 a year. It's 2,000 a month. We knock off 500 for taxes. I mean, like, I feel like at 12 an hour in Nebraska and Omaha, I feel like you could survive off of that. Am I crazy?
By linking it to inflation or median wage increase, they give you the automatic raises, but it never gets to the point where it's a living wage. So the real dirty trick there is you never revisit the issue ever again. And the minimum wage is permanently not a living wage. Because anytime you bring it up, like, hey, let's have a vote on raising the minimum wage to a living wage, they say, what are you, crazy? We have a reasonable minimum wage, and they get raises yearly because it's chained to inflation. So no, we're not going to vote on that. We're never going to vote on that again. They get the raises automatically. We don't need to revisit this issue. This issue is done. See how dirty it is? And all that could have been avoided if the left fought, because over 20 said we want...
Okay, this is such a stupid argument. Can't you make this argument for the 15 an hour minimum wage? Can't you just, like, I feel like if I was like Kyle Kulinski, like 2.0, if I was like the robot version of Kyle Kulinski, I was upgraded, couldn't I just say, this is why we could never pass minimum wage at 15 an hour, why we always have to peg it to inflation? Because imagine, if we pass 15 an hour, well, what's going to happen in 10 years when the cost of living goes up, when the median wages go up? Well, now they're going to say, well, look, we passed 15 an hour before, so now we're never going to make it any higher. We already gave you the biggest wage hike of all time. We gave you 15 an hour. You didn't want to peg to median wages before. Now you're asking for like I feel like you could like this is so dumb. This is so stupid. This is so like basic. Like I feel like this is like high school kids arguing at a lunch table over like politics. Like that's what it feels like.
Want the $15?
Like, wouldn't it be base if we did like, no, dude, that would be so stupid. Like, we got to do this. Like, well, what about in that one episode of The West Wing where, like, I don't know, this seems dumb.
Minimum wage in there.
I don't know.
But they're willing to say it and suggest it without leveraging their vote and fighting. So they don't even understand politics 101. Or they don't really want it as much as they say they do. They don't really care that much. Those are the only two options. Either they know absolutely nothing about politics, or they know they just don't really care that much. I don't know which is worse. I think both things are incredibly pathetic.
Bring up. Is it all going to be 15 an hour?
This process has shook out is the Senate bill, the House passed it, they passed a bill with $50 minimum wage. The Senate this weekend passed a bill without the $50 minimum wage, with a reduction in the unemployment benefits, the emergency unemployment benefits to, I believe it's $300 a week now. Originally it was $400.
But extended to September, right?
I recall it being promised to be $600 before the election, but I mean, we can do over the fascist one.
That was Trump's America when all was possible.
So, but they did get the votes. They got 50 votes.
Is the implication that there's like that Trump would have passed like a more progressive like form of relief? Is that the implication? Not to mention the fact that on $10,200, because Biden's plan retroactively forgives taxes on $10,000 for people under 75K, on $10,000 of unemployment insurance. What is that? That's probably an extra, what, $2,000 if I say 20%? Maybe $1,500? But
it's for the COVID package in the Senate, and now the two houses are going to get together and they're going to merge the bills. And, you know how a bill becomes law.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually go to American schools, so I had to catch that particular video on YouTube later in life. But yeah, I learned my civics from the cartoon. Yeah, I learned my civics from the cartoon. From the 40-year-old cartoon like everybody else. The other part of what David Sirota, you alluded to is, the lack of courage, one might say, from the left, pointing out that the same way that Joe Manchin has amassed, infinity stone levels of power for himself is by just being willing to hold out and say, you need my vote, and I'm not going to give it to you unless you concede to my concessions. This is a must-pass bill, and so you need me. Now, there are other senators, who potentially ones on the left, who could say the same thing. And there are certainly a large number of progressives in the House who could do the same thing because, as we've discussed at length on this program, we have very narrow margins in the House, and 6 or so progressives could hold out and make similar kinds of demands.
The reason why it doesn't make sense for them to make those demands, though, is because they're never going to lose their seats based on their vote because they're in incredibly safe areas. Whereas people like Manchin could lose their seat. But whatever.
Yeah, the Congressional, as Ro Khanna told us, the Congressional Progressive Caucus is 95 members. The COVID bill passed the House with 7 votes, a 7-vote margin. In the Senate, it was a 1-vote margin. And, I mean, is it a must-pass bill or not? If it's a must-pass bill, then you can do a lot to gum up the works.
Yeah, so when Democrats talk about it being a must-pass bill, what they mean is, I will give you anything. I have no leverage. I will sublimate myself. I will prostrate myself on the ground, wear a hair shirt, defenestrate myself, whatever you want. Daddy, I'll give you, as long as this bill passed. What conservatives hear when you say it's a must-pass bill is, I'm in power, you really want to pass this bill, you thirsty so-and-so, so you got to do what I say. And there's no reason that has to be the posture here.
I'm pretty sure that if it's a must-pass bill, I'm trying to remember, if somebody can link me polling data so that I can make sure I'm still rooted in reality, I'm pretty sure that the way that must-pass bills work are the onus, the political pressure is on the party that holds power in order to pass the bill. So when Trump, for instance, was blocking out like the budget stuff, that I'm pretty sure that scored well for the Democrats. When the government was being threatened to shut down and stuff, that typically the party in power will get blamed for a failure to negotiate on those bills. So when they say must pass, they mean that whatever administration is in charge is the one that must pass the bill. Like, Yeah, the Trump bill over the border wall was like the longest government shutdown in history. And I'm pretty sure that polling-wise, that ended up playing out not good for Trump's administration. Like, it hurt them.
Or the other thing, they increased the means testing. They dialed the means testing up to 11. And I mean that some people who got, big checks from Donald Trump are not getting shit in this bill.
Right. So I heard a point made on our favorite show.
What? Not getting shit in this bill? Hold on. What were the size of the checks? Why are we only talking about the size of the checks? Those child tax credits are huge. You might have gone from getting $0 because the tax credit was not refundable to getting $3,600. And you're getting those checks from the government. You don't even have to wait to file your taxes. You're getting those checks proactively. That's massive. Like, what do you mean they're not getting shit? Like, what are you talking about?
Of America, that I don't really know what the point is if you're Joe Manchin to go back to West Virginia and say, yeah, I really screwed over people who make $80,000 a year. I mean, it's one thing to be able to kind of like string up a millionaire and show that you've kept them from getting undue funds, but it's weird to kind of make a villain out of someone who is wealthier than the average American, but like just a middle class person still.
I did not follow that.
So if you're a moderate Dem, the argument would be, I'm gonna argue for means testing because the argument is I'm gonna keep rich people from getting money so that poor people can get money. But if the villain you're making, we're talking about people who are earning $80,000 a year being kept from getting funds, then it's hard to champion.
So the problem is that right now she's saying something she thinks is not good, but she just doesn't know any of the data or have any idea what happened during the lockdown, right? So the reason why, but now we've read this, right? Because we spent a full 30 minutes reading articles, okay? The reason why it makes sense to do this is because a lot of middle-class workers didn't actually lose their jobs in the shutdown. Now, I know that a lot of you guys might be upset and a lot of white people on Twitter get really mad, but fuck the middle class. Middle class did okay during the recession. Arguably, some of the middle class did really well. The people that got fucked were the working class people, especially brown people, black people, and working women. Those are the groups that got super fucked. If you're a white collar worker and you held on to your job and you got to work from home and you got a stipend from your job about it or related to it because they paid for your internet or food or whatever, and you saved money because you weren't going out and spending money on services because they shut down, you did pretty well in 2020. You did okay. The fact that so much of this bill went towards like working class people or made like that child tax credit refundable or lowered the caps on the ACA, that shit is awesome. I don't know if we would have had all that if we were giving money to like dipshit Harvard grads or other podcast losers that are making over $30,000 a month on their fucking podcasts. Like, I don't know if we would have had that money to make the child tax credit refundable or to expand it up to $3,000 or $3,600 per dependent.
Keeping money from them in the same way that you could champion, I screwed over a millionaire. Like screwing over someone who makes $80,000 a year just doesn't hit the same way.
So what you're saying is the pod save gentlemen were right in this one?
Yeah, they were right. I mean, look, they're often right. I'm sorry. But look, Virgil, I don't want to upset you. Maybe we should play the clip because I was listening to the most recent episode as I got ready for today's show, as I often do, as I put my face on, because I only put my face on for the 2 hours we're on camera, and I immediately take it all off, like the sad clown tear meme. And they were
what, Pagliacci? That meme Pagliacci?
I will say it's not that they're always so wrong. It's hard to put into words what you're getting from the show that's so frustrating. So I thought we should just listen to this clip because I think it's a really good example of how things are framed there in a way that just never puts the onus on the Biden administration.
For grand savings of $12 billion out of a $1.9 trillion package. Do you have any idea like what the moderate Democrats who demanded this got out of the deal?
Feel better about themselves? It's so stupid. It is so stupid. We talk all the time about lessons in 2009 and et cetera. But the one that I think is the most important lesson for all Democrats to recognize is err on the side of the strongest economy possible. This is not what the Biden administration wanted to do. This was clearly, it must have been, I think there's relatively limited reporting on this, but it's pretty clear that this was what it took to get, I assume, Joe Manchin and maybe a couple others to be the 50th vote for this bill. It is incredibly stupid. It does not, the overall bill is still an incredibly progressive, important piece of legislation because of Joe Manchin and others. It will not be as good as it could be. $15 minimum wage. The checks being stingier than they should be. The general rule in an economic crisis is err on the side of helping more people rather than fewer. And they made the wrong decision.
A big progressive piece of legislation. It took Donald Trump like a week to fucking ram through a gigantic bailout package. And the Congress, and that was less stingy than this because those checks went out to more people.
That's the thing.
I like. Whoa, fuck! What was the Noah article? Like it's not just the checks. There's so much more that goes into this. To be fair, for Donald Trump, there was more than that as well. But like, it's not just the checks. And this bill does way more for lower class or working class people than Donald Trump's did. That was mainly targeted at like fucking like larger businesses and the entire economy. Like It's not just the checks.
Like, I listen to the show because they'll say the thing that happened and they articulated it well, and they'll even sometimes give you that marginal critique. Yeah, it sucks that all of these conservative Democrats made the bill less good. But somehow, some way, I don't know if it's like a contractual obligation, I don't know if it's just a sincere belief that because Joe is good and likes ice cream and dogs, that of course he must have wanted a better outcome than this, when every single thing, as we've been discussing on this show, indicates that he did not want a better outcome. He's the one that said before the parliamentarian ruling that he didn't think the parliamentarian was going to do it. He's the one whose VP had the power to overturn a parliamentarian ruling. He's the one that had the power to negotiate with Manchin and Sinema and to push them, but instead he used...
Wait, just because you overturn the parliamentarian ruling doesn't mean that you're going to get every other Senate Dem on board with the 15 an hour. It's like, this is so boring. They just want 15 an hour. That's like literally the only thing these guys care about. Like, they have a little pet project. They've got like a little virtue signal position, and it's 15 an hour and Medicare for all. And these are the only two things they care about or think about in all of U.S. policy. Like, this is the only thing they think about. Like... It's the only thing that goes through their head. They don't think about any other thing related to politics. And then maybe like woke issues when they can get brownie points for it.
These artificial roadblocks to, alleviate himself from any pressure to do so.
So who gives a shit what Joe Biden wants? Joe Biden wants a warm bath and the nurse to stop stealing his change. Because he doesn't know where the fuck he is.
Anyway, I heard it, so you do too. I sometimes feel like the less criticisms are, like just, oh, these people suck and I hate it. And, it's a little bit more than that. Like, I think it's important for us to understand why it is that we all saw the same thing happen with the $15 minimum wage. But one cohort of us, the left, is furious. And all of these liberals who ostensibly were like, yes, fight for 15 hashtag in their bios and stuff, are so easily accepting the outcome. And this is why.
Because of that show?
Yeah, because all the entire media narrative coming out of the center is that this was an inevitability that Joe Biden can control. And all of the blame lies on these third parties, whether it's conservative Democrats or parliamentarian or the idea of bipartisanship. Yeah. They talk endlessly about how 0 Republicans voted for and all of this kind of stuff to distract from the fact that regardless, we could have had a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so we know what we're up against, that's all.
Okay, so this was my weekly torture session. We can just go to the interviews. I just have to comment on the weirdness of the past few days.
Please.
There's some very weird vibes coming out of politics. Kristen Sinema, or is it Kirsten Sinema? I never figured it out. She spells the name with a Y.
Well, then that's her parents' fault. The H, I would just like to say the H in my name is clarifying with respect to pronunciation. It's not confusing. The H is
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is her name. I don't know what I'm doing. Who showed up in this kawaii fucking outfit and thumbs down her vote against the minimum wage hike.
Yeah, did a little shimmy and then promptly accused everybody who complained about her doing the thumbs down, which not only mocked poor people, but John McCain, who people in Arizona adore. Everyone who criticized her is of course doing a sexism.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say right now, Kristen Sinema is no longer bisexual. I'm gonna do bi erasure to Kristen Sinema. You're out.
You remember the racial draft sketch? I think it was Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, Chappelle show.
You're gonna have like a LGBT QIA draft sketch.
Yeah, I don't know who gets her the straights, the bisexuals.
Give everyone the asexuals.
We're done.
One last one of these, okay?
Well, howdy there, Internet.
This guy. Good luck. Beau? I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I only see it typed. I never hear people refer to him. Beau. All right. Most videos I've seen of this guy seem to be decent-ish. Let's see. Where do we get off on the Biden train, baby? Good luck.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Beau again. So today we're going to talk about Biden. What he has done, what he's planning on doing, what he learned from Democratic presidencies of the past, and how he plans to avoid the same mistakes they made. And me. We got two questions here. One's really more of a comment, but it kind of leads into the other thing. It said that I was the only person on YouTube who had a higher opinion of Biden today than I did before the election. I don't know if that's true. I don't know the opinions of everybody on YouTube. But if I seem like I have a higher opinion of Biden today than I did before the election, it's because I have a higher opinion of Biden today than I did before the election. Yeah, that's an accurate read. I did not expect a whole lot from Biden. Like nothing, really. If you were around then, numerous times. I said, he's not my man. He is not my people. We don't share the same politics. We don't share the same ideology. He's not my guy. He's just better than the other guy. He's a stopgap. Honestly, I expected a reboot of the Obama administration. And I think there's a lot of people who think that's what we're getting. It's not. It's not. Not if you're paying attention. It's not what's happening. I also think there's a habit among people who talk about politics to talk about what should be rather than what is first. You can talk about what should be, but you have to acknowledge the reality of the world that you're in. And I think there were a whole lot of progressive people who wanted things from Biden and expected things from him that he never agreed to. I never did. I just expected him to do kind of the bare minimum, revert and get rid of the worst of Trump's policies. That was my expectation of him. He's done more than that already. So yeah, I do have a higher opinion of him. And we're going to talk about why. And I think a lot of people's opinions about him are going to change because it goes into that next question. And that was, why didn't he trash the Republicans in his speech? Democrats don't know how to wield power. He should have pointed out that they voted against the stimulus and all of this stuff and they've been obstructionist. And yeah, I get it. And that would make sense if you weren't doing what Biden's trying to do. he doesn't actually need to do that because Republicans have been trained by Trump to call everything radical left and distance themselves and be obstructionist and point out that they're being obstructionist. Biden is running on this theme of unity or whatever. We all know it's not real. There's no unity up there. And Republicans are pointing it out, so he doesn't have to. He can get up there and take a high road and not really suffer for it. Because
I feel like
are doing the work.
Something that I'm so curious, and this is how I'm just so curious how this is going to play out. I don't know what's going to happen. So this relief bill seems like it. So under Trump, now whether you like it or not, and I listened to a lot of local radio and shit at the time. I don't remember why. So maybe my shit is a little bit biased here. But when those Trump tax cuts went through, I felt like the average American, regardless of how tilted these were towards large corporations, was really happy that they saw some like bumper bonus in cash. That there were a lot of Americans that were like, yo, I got a $500 bonus in my job. This is actually fucking awesome. That the vast majority of Americans, whether left, right, or whatever, that they got like an actual impact from the money that they earn. And they were like, you know what? Fuck Trump, but damn, this is sick. And then the people that like Trump were like, this is Trump 100%. Thank God. God bless us, it's Trump. And I feel like that impact was felt. Like, not on podcasts, not on news or whatever, but like actual individuals in the US like felt that like Trump had helped them. When you have this type of cash transfer, this expansion of unemployment, this much stimulus to people with children, if they feel that, if they have that feeling of like, damn, I'm getting actual fucking big ass checks now from the government because I have kids and shit, I feel like that's gotta be so damaging that Republicans stood in unison and voted 100% against the COVID-19 relief package, especially with like all the state government funding being shored up and everything. Like that's gotta be, I'm so curious how that's gonna play out in the future. Who knows? We'll see like a year or two from now. Like, I'm really, really, really curious, or maybe people will just forget or they won't know or whatever. I don't know. I'm so curious about that.
And in that stimulus bill, there's a whole lot of stuff that Republicans are going to have to answer for. And they've done it themselves. They have done it themselves. They have pointed out that they didn't support it. They pointed out that it was left. It's not. But there are some breadcrumbs in it. Some little hints of leftish stuff. Social Democrat stuff. People talked about the child tax credit. And they're like, it's going to lift kids out of poverty. It's great. Standard talking point. And I mean, that sounds like DC stuff. This is a little different. It's going to be an unusual tax credit in some ways. Because some people will be able to collect a portion of their tax refund each month from July on. They'll be able to just go ahead and take a couple $100 a month from it. And the impact of this is if you are a minimum wage worker, have 2 kids, you're about to see 50% increase in your take-home pay, roughly 47-ish, somewhere in there. That's sounds kind of UBI-ish, because it is. It is. There's some healthcare provisions. People who lost their job, they're going to get free healthcare for a couple months. There's more subsidies. It's not socialized, that would be bad. Subsidies, free healthcare. There are little bits and pieces of left-wing stuff throughout it. Not real left, but American left. And it's a test run. Working-class Americans are going to get to experience it. And most of this stuff ends right before the midterms.
That is strategically important too, right? Yeah. Man, the midterms are going to be so important.
And the Republicans who are now sitting there and have been sitting there saying, this is left, it's bad, we're going to vote against it, are going to have to explain why they voted against it and convince the working class Americans who I would assume would grow to like some of it. Now, I don't advocate for this, but if Biden wanted to play real nasty, he could have done what Trump tried to do. Because what Trump tried to do was, what was it? Trump was trying to make it so that you would be exempt from paying payroll taxes, I think. However, there was like a clause that would have made it so you would have had to pay all of it back at the beginning of like this year if he didn't get reelected. It was like some crazy shit. I don't think that actually ended up passing though. But I remember there was like some part, I don't know if it was part of the CARES Act or what he was trying to do, but Trump was trying to make it so they're like, listen, I'm going to make it so you're not going to have to pay payroll tax for like the last 6 months of the year, but you're going to have to pay it back on January like 10th or whatever. However, if I get elected, I'll waive that part. So the idea would be that if Trump doesn't get reelected, you get like a huge fucking bill for back taxes handed to you. Now that would have been like, I don't think Biden should do stuff like that, but Jesus Christ. The stuff that they will vote to keep it. There have been a lot of Democratic presidencies in the past that suffered major setbacks because of losses at the midterms. Biden has set the stage to make sure that doesn't happen to him. He is working to try out ideas that are far more progressive than anything I ever expected from Biden, to be completely honest. And I don't think there are many people on this channel watching this that expected anything like that from him. Status quo. And it is. I mean, it's still not real.
Wouldn't the next president just waive that too? Not necessarily, because if a Democratic president got in, but the Republicans still control the Senate, then they wouldn't let them get rid of it. Or it would become a new negotiating point, basically. Yeah.
Left policies. But it's a whole lot further than I think anybody genuinely expected. Not what they wanted, not what should be. But in reality, what is, I don't think anybody expected this kind of stuff. And the only reason you would run a test run using these things is if you planned on pushing more through after the midterm. Biden, it's been said that Biden wants a FDR-style presidency. If this little test run works, if the American people respond to the little bits and pieces that are embedded in all of this various stuff, he might be on his way to it. It's surprising. It's surprising to me. I didn't expect it from him. He never hinted that that's what he was going to do. But that is certainly where it seems to be heading. Now, maybe we're wrong. Maybe working class Americans are going to get a little taste of unions and healthcare and social democratic policies, and they don't like it. Maybe that happens. He suffers a big loss at the midterms. Or maybe there's some scandal. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think Biden's plan is to do exactly what he's been doing. Stay out of sight, let everybody underestimate him, push through bills that are very vague, and have little bits and pieces of stuff in it. Stuff that will have a tangible impact on a whole lot of people. And then Republicans, in their obstructionist nature, will have voted against it, and they will have to defend those positions come the midterms. And it is far beyond anything I expected from Biden. So,
Fuck, not to mention that, like, I'm thinking of, like, because since I know so much more about the Omaha situation now, I'm thinking of, like, on the Omaha budget, there was going to be a big shortfall of cash, basically, as well. And there's, like, so much money that they needed in Omaha for different projects. How does it feel when you have, like, a Republican mayor? So I'm thinking of Gene Stoughton in Omaha, or like a Republican governor, so Ricketts in Nebraska, and then other Republican governors who are now finally able to, like, shore up their budgets because of a progressive president's, like, stimulus. That's going to be, I feel like that's like a lot of pressure that could theoretically be put on you as well. Like come election time, like, oh, cool, like glad you could finally balance the budget. What President Biden able to do, right? I feel like that there's like the implication behind a lot of that is interesting as well.
So yeah, I do have a higher opinion of it. I do. And this doesn't just extend to stuff like this. I know the way people feel about the foreign policy, but it's the details. It's the intent. It's the long-term goal that you have to look at. And it's not the same. It really isn't. There are a lot of signs that show that he is testing the waters for a far more progressive administration than anybody expected. But he's doing it in a way that allows him to backtrack very quickly into normal Democratic establishment mode if it doesn't go well. So anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
We know more about the bill. Hasan take on minimum wage. Oh no. I'll do like 2 seconds of this, but I don't care that much.
All you're doing is creating more of a rift between those in the middle class, lower middle class, or maybe even like upper middle class, and people who are poor, the working poor, pitted against the middle class Americans who feel like they are not getting something out of the government that they thought they were about to get for no reason whatsoever. Because absolutely zero people were like, honestly, we really need to limit the scope of this. Like, who was making an argument? Republicans certainly weren't. Republicans are too busy talking about Mr. Potato Head's cock. Okay, that's literally all Republicans.
So Hasan doesn't know any of the information. So again, as we said before a million times, middle class America made out pretty well in 2020. The amount of cash bonuses and everything that people got, the amount of the being able to work from home, the amount of money saved for lack of services or whatever, like the middle class did okay in 2020.
I'm talking about. They are so insanely hyper-focused on the culture wars because they realize that, like, taking a stand, especially in the aftermath of the Trump administration, taking a stand against left-wing economic populism is not going to be good. You think Republicans are going to go out and talk to their newly acquired base or their newly galvanized base of support and tell them, like, well, actually, we need austerity measures and we need to be a little bit more responsible because of deficit this, deficit that. Like, no, that's not. Republicans
do this all the time. Of course they do. Republicans always talk about controlling spending and always talk about austerity. Why? Here's something I don't understand about leftists. Why do leftists talk about how, oh, austerity is horrible and everybody hates it, despite the fact that there are austerity parties like all over the fucking world, in Europe as well, by the way. In fact, I would almost say, I could be wrong on this. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. Austerity is even more, I think, of a European term than an American term. Like, because in America, we usually say like fiscal responsibility or whatever. But when I hear austerity, I'm usually hearing that, I think, in the context of like Western European political parties. I don't even know if people say austerity in the United States. I don't know if I even hear that in the US as a term. Like, like this idea that nobody likes austerity, nobody will vote for it anywhere. It's like, okay, well, like so many fucking right-wing parties across all of Europe like run on austerity measures and shit. I don't understand why I don't understand why you think it's not popular anywhere other than the fact that you only follow like 6 ultra progressive, ultra like shining white people on fucking Twitter. Like,
know that they can't do that. So they talk about Mr. Potato Head's cock and they talk about Dr. Seuss. That's why they've been doing this while there's an ongoing conversation. So let me ask you all this, okay? If you love the Democratic Party, if you literally jerk off the photos of Nancy Pelosi because you have a shrine dedicated to her because you think the Democrats are the best thing that's ever happened, even if you feel that way, even if you're the #1 Democratic Party supporter, okay?
Okay, I don't care about this. Listen, okay? I did it. I put in my time. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed. Okay, let's just do this, okay? All I want to play right now is Darkwood, okay? I'm fighting against that urge. I hope you guys are proud of me for it, okay?